he would have been like somebody stepped on a mouse, and his eyes got real big. He says, "You just saved my life."
Today on In the Woodyard, my brother Ken and I are heading out west to go to New Mexico elk hunting, and we're talking about some of the things that have happened over the years with him operating heavy equipment, and he's got some good stories to tell you guys, some good scary stories. So Ken's got some stories he's been telling me, and I thought there's such good stories in there that you got to hear some of these. So why don't you start out with the one where the train was pulling, or you're pulling moving the trains in the woodyard?
Yeah, usually it's stuff you shouldn't be doing. You know, I worked in a wood yard and I loaded train cars. This is back before we had the big LeBaire swing loaders. Well, we had what were pettibone carry lifts back in the day. That was back in the 90s, late 90s. And I don't know what the machines weighed. They were probably, I don't know, 25,000, 35,000 pound machines. And instead of being like a crane, like a swing loader with a bucket, well, they had a bucket, but instead of just sitting in one spot and swinging the wood, you would go to the pile, you'd grab like a cord and a quarter you could pick up, and we'd run over a train car and we'd load the train cars. Well, the railroad crew didn't always park where it was convenient for me. So once in a while you'd have to move those cars. Well, I don't know what an empty rail car weighs, you know, but quite a few tons. And so what we would do, normally I had two guys. One guy would ride the train and set the brake, and the other guy would be pulling it. But I was alone that day, and young and dumb and impatient. So we'd bleed all the air off all the cars so they had no brakes. You need to release the manual brake on each end. You hook a chain onto the cars and you start driving, put it in low gear and start pulling them cars. Problem was that day I had half the cars loaded, so I had maybe 8 cars loaded, which they got 30 cords in, so I don't know what tonnage is. It's like 240 tons per car already loaded, plus the empty cars to get them closer to where I had to load, because I didn't have to carry the wood as far, was the reason for moving them. But the mistake I made is I got them rolling a little bit too fast. And there was kind of a dip in the track, and they took off on me. And they were headed for the derailleur on the other end of the yard. So if they go through the derailleur, I'm in big trouble. Or they might not have had the derailleur back then even. They'd be out on the main line, which is even worse. So what happened, they were picking out speed, and I'm like, oh God, here we go. I had to bail out of the moving machine, not get run over, run to the car, set the handbrake on the first car. But it was in the winter time, it was icy, and it's steel on steel slides, so it's still dragging me. I had to run to the next car, which is, 60 feet long, set the next brake, run to the next car, set the next brake. I was just about had a heart attack by the time I got done. I got her shut down before she hit the switch, and I never did that again by myself. But that was a bad situation there. That could have.
And it was dragging your machine.
It was dragging my machine along the side of the track. I didn't wreck anything. I didn't tell anybody about it for a long time. But yeah, don't do that again.
We switched it up here. Ken was driving and I was filming and interviewing, and he was doing the talk. And yesterday it worked easier when we were just talking like this, because I think of a question and he can ask. So that's what we're going to do from now on. So we switched up the driver interviewer navigation. So next question, he told me a story about he was loading a cat, a D6 or something, and he had to go plow.
I was hauling a D6 cat out to a federal Forest Service road that hadn't been plowed all winter. Slow down here, you're gonna hit this guy. Because there was like 3 feet of snow on the ground, and these roads hadn't been plowed all winter. So we got to the end of the town road, and I was following my boss out there, and I had a brand new D6 cat. I don't know what year that was, 90 something, early 90s. I don't know what it was, but I don't think I had 100 hours on that Dozer. It was a nice machine,
brand new,
just brand new. It was a beauty. Anyway, so we're getting out there, and we get off the end of the town road. Well, bam, it's not plowed. Bam, I'm stuck with the semi. It was on a curve, a kind of a slope on the side. You had a kind of a bank to it. So we're like, well, we'll unload her and I'll drag myself out of here and start plowing from here. I'm gonna have to plow in the Forest Service road for the next 10 miles to get to the job we were trying to plow out for our loggers to start logging on. So I took chains off, dropped the ramps on a lowboy. Anyways, took the chains off, started backing the dozer up. I didn't move 4 inches, and sideways off the trailer I went, down in the ditch on my side, flopped her right over, thinking, damn it. I had my seatbelt on, nothing got damaged. I flopped her over. It was a deep ditch, but there was like 4 feet of snow on the ground, so I had a nice soft landing. I just hit the throttle off and turned the key off and crawled out. Luckily, we could get out of there with the pickup and go for help. We had to go find another lowboy and another dozer. Well, we had 4 at that time. I think we had 4 D6s that the company had nearby, so we just needed to find another lowboy. So we got a hold of a guy with a lowboy. We got a hold of our other guy with a dozer, and he came out and we flopped her back up and checked the fluids on it and let her sit a while, started her up, and that was the end of that. Didn't hurt a thing, no scratches. I think we lost a little hydraulic oil out of the breather cap, but that was about it. So it was a happy ending on that one. Nobody got hurt, didn't wreck nothing, just took the rest of the day to clean up the mess, and get plowed out and everything else. So
What about the one with the guy that you guys were clearing?
Oh, we had another one. Yeah, me and my partner were out raking. What we were doing at the time, we had rock rakes on our D6s, and they would clear cut off an area where they wanted to curve. We were converting hardwood stands over to pine, because the mill that we worked for in the future was projecting that they're going to need more pine, so we were putting in pine plantations. So we were raking all the slash on these jobs. We did, I don't know, thousands of acres a year, thousands and thousands. I think I did it for 5 years. I think I did 5,000 acres. I did 1,000 acres a year, and there was about 6 of us doing this. So we planted millions and millions of trees back in the day, back in the 80s and 90s. But we were clearing a hill off one day, and it was pretty steep, and I was on top, and he was working on the side hill, and I'm raking back and forth. We're shoving all the brush in big monster piles, and pretty soon I see him over there waving his arms like, come on, come on. I'm like, okay, whatever, I'm heading over there. Well, you're driving over rocks and stumps. It's not like you're going fast. And he was freaking out over, like, what the heck's your problem? Well, I get to the edge of the hill. Yeah, there's his dozer laying on its side. So he flopped her over. But the funny thing is usually on them dozers, we had doors on either side we could get out of. But because his door latch was broke on one side, he had it wired shut from the outside, and then he flopped it over on his good door, so he couldn't get out for a while. I didn't know it because I couldn't see him over there. So he finally found something in its side he could beat on the wire till he got the door open. So he was a little excited, but same thing, no big deal. We had 1-inch cable winches on our dozers back then, so we just hooked it on his roll cage. I flopped him back over, and same old story. We checked the oil and went back to work. Never told nobody about it. So boss didn't need to know about that one. Yeah. So later in my years, I had to tell the boss about it. He said, oh, I'm glad I didn't know about it. So yeah, that stuff happens like that. I mean, there was a lot of times I'd get stuck on a job, and we'd have 2 dozers, and I'd have to run them both at one time, pull myself out, hook the winch into one and put it in gear and jump off of that one.
What's the one where you got hung up that time?
Well, I'm getting to that.
Oh, okay.
Well, what I would do, if I was by myself and I had two dozers on the job, a lot of times you get down in a mud hole. We had them old D6Ds that didn't have no lift with the cylinders. You get hooked on a 1-foot stump, it seemed like, back then with them rock rakes. Then we went to the H series where you had the high tracks. That was a way big improvement, but this was the old D6Ds back then, and you'd get hung up on stuff pretty easy. So I'd get stuck, and I'd go get the other dozer. I'd hook the big winch onto it, and if I couldn't just pull it off, I would put it in gear, jump off of that dozer, jump in the other one, put it in gear, and wiggle myself out of the hole I was in. But then you had to put the brake on, jump on the other cat while the tracks were turning, and get in it, So that wasn't really a safe deal, but
Not at all.
I did that a few times. It wasn't an everyday occurrence, but you just had to be careful. I was young and nimble back then. I don't think I would do that now. Nowadays you'd call for help, but a lot of times you're 40 miles away from anybody. And back then there was no cell phones. We had two-way radios, but they weren't always far to reach out, so you did what you did. So yeah.
What about the guy that was standing in the wrong spot with the wrong chain?
Oh well, this is a Wyoming job. This is an oil field. I worked on the oil wells out here, and company I worked for, we did a lot of jobs. We worked on the pumping units is what we worked on. A lot of Lufkins, American units, guys that work in oil field. If any guys got any experience in that, you'll know what I'm talking about. Them pump jacks, you see the big crank arms going around. Well, when we're working on them, a lot of times we had to disconnect from the wellhead, or we had to roll the crank arms up to do whatever we were going to do. We did a lot of service work on these on these pump jacks. And I had a new guy working for me, and we were rolling the crank arms up, and he used too small of a chain. He put a 5/16 chain on there, I think it was. And I said, that's not big enough chain. Normally you use a 1/2 inch. And we had high test chain. And he's standing right directly underneath the crank arms as we're lifting them up with the, back then we had Stinger trucks. Not a lot of cranes were out there yet, but Stinger truck, it's kind of like a giant tow truck, had a 1-inch cable on it. We could lift 40 feet with it. So anyways, I said, get out of there. I said, if that chain breaks, and I said, that's too small of a chain. And he took one step back and the chain broke. And them crank arms, I mean, you got tens of thousands of pounds of cast iron weights coming down, and then you're on a concrete pad, so them crank arms only clear the ground by maybe 2 to 3 inches. He would have been like somebody stepped on a mouse, and his eyes got real big. He says, you just saved my life. I said, yep. I said, you ever gonna stand there again? He says, nope. Can you use a bigger chain next time? Yep. So yeah, that was that was like a holy crap moment, He stepped back and bam, the chain broke. Oh my God. Because if you guys know anything about those, I've known there's got to be somebody down here in the oil field. You know what them crank arms do? If somebody's underneath there, it'd just be like you stepping on a mouse. It'd be just like that. You'd be just flat. Yeah. So yeah, that was like, holy crap.
So the next story that he's got is a dump truck story where you work in the cranberry marsh.
Well, yeah, I was working weekends on the cranberry marsh back when I was young. We were only working 40 hours a week, and we worked 4 10-hour days, so I had Friday, Saturday, and Sunday off, so I would work on the cranberry marsh another 40 hours because I had young kids to raise. And so we were building new cranberry marshes. Once again, this is back in the
90s, probably.
Early 90s. Yeah. Early 90s. And so I was hauling, we were digging, it was all sand. We were hauling short haul, like not even a quarter mile, and dump into an old sand pit, building this cranberry marsh. So you fill the dump truck about every 10 minutes and then go dump it. Well, we had an old dump truck where you had to reach out the window and pull the rope. This is before we got fancy stuff where you hit a button to dump your box. And I probably had been hauling for about 15 hours that day. You're tired, you're not paying attention, you're just doggy. And I backed up to the edge of the dump. You back up till the back tire starts to sink. It's like, okay, don't go no farther than that. And I kicked in the PTO to raise her up, and I'm sitting there waiting for it to dump, and all of a sudden I felt the front end start to float up, and then, oh crap, and I stomped the clutch. Too late. She broke over the hill, and I went about 6 feet off the ground. The front tires were about 6 feet off the ground. I was like, oh, that was a pucker moment there.
So why did that happen?
I didn't open the box. And then the back end, when the sand started pouring out over the back, it sunk, and it took me over the hill a little bit. So I'm pointing up in the sky, and I'm looking around. Anybody see that one? So I jump out. I got to crawl up and get the rope to trip the box, and I did. And then bam, down comes the front end. But there, I'm still sitting there stuck. So then I had to go get the bulldozer and pull myself out. And That was yeah, you don't want to dump over a bank and not trip your gate. It's not a good feeling when you're pointing in the sky. I'm sure it's been done before. Nothing got broke. Another close call, but
those are how you learn. Make your mistakes. It's just always good when you don't get hurt or break equipment.
It's always good when you don't wreck nothing and nobody gets hurt. I've had a lot of those.
What about we said there's a crane one?
Yeah, I ran a crane in Wyoming in an oil field, one of my last jobs. Well, same company we were working for when I told you about the crank arms situation. That was same place. I was running a 90-ton P&H crane, and we were picking a whole pumping unit up and setting it off the wellhead, and they said just set it off as far as you can reach, it'll be good enough. Well, the ground is sloped downhill, so I was booming out, booming down, laying my boom down. I was just keeping a little bit off the ground, but I didn't realize, and I was setting it off the back of the crane, so I had the whole crane behind me. And I figured, well, when she gets a little pucker moment, I'll just set it down. Well, what happened, it worked like a pendulum, and it just swung out because it was going downhill. And with a hydraulic crane, you can't just free fall. You got to power down. And when it was swinging out faster than I could get it down. So by the time I got it touching the ground, the back of the crane was about 8 feet off the ground. I was sitting on 2 outriggers. I'm glad I didn't snap them off. If it would have been off the side, I would have flopped it probably, but it was off the back. So I had the whole crane that weighed 90,000 pounds behind me for counterweight. So that was another pucker moment there for sure. I got pictures of that someplace. I wish I could find them, but so all I did is just, let it down, and the crane sat back down, and nothing got broke. Once again, we lucked out. So there's stuff happens. Well, I know of some stuff that happened that wasn't so good, that oil field stuff where guys got killed. I wasn't there for them, but I heard the stories. There was one where they were laying down the derrick on the rig. So that rig is standing up like this, and that derrick sometimes is 120 feet tall, and they lay it down onto a stand, and they had the bright idea, well, we're just going to use 2 cranes. Well, as it broke over center, there was too much weight for the cranes, and it snapped both the booms off them cranes. I didn't get to see that one, but that was a place that I worked at, a different place out there. I don't think anybody got killed on that one, but damn lucky they didn't. Yeah, there was a lot of stuff in the oil field that was pretty dangerous. I mean, I was out there for 5 years. That's where I learned a lot of stuff before I came back to Wisconsin and started doing my other career, I guess you call it. But still running equipment and hydraulics and that kind of stuff, driving truck.
So that's it for today's video. Now tomorrow, which is going to be in about 2 minutes for us, but on tomorrow's video, we're going to talk about some of Kenny's near fatal accidents and all the stuff that went wrong in logging industry. We're going to talk about his career with all of his logging stuff. So that's going to be tomorrow's video. So that's it for today, folks. You know what to do. Hit the buttons, hit the like, the share, the subscribe, all that. Thanks for watching. See you back tomorrow. Between then, get outside, get cutting.
First thing I gotta say is not good night, Irene. First thing I gotta say, I don't know if you can see me, is we are right now in Kansas, and shortly, I think within a half hour, we're gonna be in Colorado. So I get to say we're not in Kansas anymore, Dorothy. Good night, Irene.